Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Tomo, and welcome to my post-race Chinwag for the 2024 Sao Paulo Grand Prix, Brazilian Grand Prix. And I thought it was apt that we had a bit of a delayed start because that was the story of this weekend, was it not? Now, of course, we're not going to talk too much about the sprint because I did a post-sprint Chinwag, which covered all the sprint shenanigans. This means we can focus in on what was a hectic Grand Prix, I think is the best word for this one. Welcome Halita, Zach, Benny, Jackie, Joel, Jack, Rissan, Alfie, Doha, Kiefer, Sploder, Awkward, and everyone listening on audio app only platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. This is also available, will be available in video format on Spotify after the fact as well. And after this, I will be live on Patreon exclusively to have a bit more of a relaxed, just chat about whatever you like. All right, so if you want to support what I do on Patreon, links are down in the description down below, patreon.com/TommoF1. Okay, let's get into it, starting with you lot, lovely live chatters here on YouTube. Can you please let me know your race rating out of 10? Now, to be fair, actually, I'm just going to do the poll straight away because I reckon there's going to be a few 10s here. So I'm going to do options. Do you give this one a 10? Do you give it a 9? Do you give it an 8? Or do you give it a 7? Now, of course, I know, or under, I guess, 7 or under. I know my race ratings can be somewhat quite sus. Bear in mind, right, we do realise what a 10 is. A 10 is the perfect F1 race. Now, I've seen a few 10s. I'm like, was this the greatest race of all time? Perhaps it wasn't. Oh my God, I've just realised. I've not got my pink light on. Hang on. This isn't right. God, I'm slacking. No one told me. Maybe you did tell me, and I just didn't see. See, that's the difference. That's my ambient yellow light versus the pink vibes. You know, come on, gosh, I'm slipping here. Right, okay. What were we saying? 6% of you have given it a 7 or under. 18% of you have given it an 8. 31% of you a 9. 46% of you have given it a 10. Really? Look, listen. It was good and all, but for me, it's a 5. I'm joking. It's not a 5. Okay. For me, it's an 8. For me, it's an 8. Okay. Very interesting. A lot of stop-start. We didn't get a proper scrap for the race win. Max did win by a massive margin in the end. It was a very interesting race. It wasn't the perfect Grand Prix. It definitely wasn't a 10. It's an 8. And I'm not giving it any more of that. And I do not care what anyone says. There is no way that was more. That was never a 10 out of 10. Come on. Behave yourself. Just because there's a lot of red flags and a lot of stoppages does not make a great race, by the way. So yeah, for me it's a 10. Out of 80. No, that doesn't make sense. I meant to say 8 and I tried to kind of finesse it and it didn't work. That was an 8 out of 10 race. Very, very good, by the way. Very, very good. Very, very good Grand Prix. Very enjoyable. A lot going on. It was one of them, you know, this weekend, it felt like such a long weekend because obviously we had the massive delay to qualifying, which then got pushed back, obviously, to this morning. We had a full sprint. We had like a full dry qualifying and race, and then we had a full wet qualifying and race. I feel like that's the first time we've ever happened. What is a 10 then? I mean, a 10 is like... A 10 has to be one of the most iconic Grand Prix of all time for it to be a 10 out of 10, surely. And this was very interesting, but it's not a 10. Okay? It's a 10 if you support Alpine. That's true, Zoe. That's very true. Yeah, look, there was a lot going on. There's a lot to get into. Obviously, there was the nonsense chat beforehand, like there always seems to be, as of late, where we're not talking about the racing and we're talking about some kind of stewarding decision and the decision to bring out red flags when they did in qualifying. I did a little thread on Twitter, actually, just giving my full feelings on it. The long and the short of it, it was very, very unlucky for Max, the timing of Stroll's crash. There is no such thing as an immediate red flag. Even for Alex's crash, there was an 8-second gap between Alex crashing and qualifying, which was painful for me. And obviously for him, but yeah, ended his Grand Prix, didn't even get to start it. There was an 8-second gap between him crashing and the red flag coming out. There was 8 seconds of yellow flags. But there's no such thing as an immediate red flag. It doesn't happen. Precedent is set. There's no way that Max would have made a lap. Barely anyone would have made a lap, right? It's a 1 minute 25 lap time. And you're saying at 1 minute 37, there should have been an immediate red flag. Even if there was an immediate red flag, you're only given 13 seconds of concession leeway to get out the pit exit, which is a pretty long pit exit, by the way. And to get to the front of that queue, you need to be going out early and queuing, and then you lose all your tyre temp anyway. It wouldn't have happened. It was unlucky. But of course, the conspiracy theories were big and bold. And you know what? Max said it himself, right? You win some, you lose some. And he lost out in qualifying. But you know what? A red flag worked for him in the race. And that's how it goes sometimes, right? Lando got unlucky in the race relative to Max. Max got unlucky relative to Lando in qualifying. Game's the game, all right? Game's the game, and that's how it goes. And yeah, I think that, you know what? Qualifying was one where it was like, it was, because it just kept stopping. It's 5 red flags. 5 red flags is like, it's too much. And it was so stop-start, it was just getting annoying. It didn't really have that super exciting crescendo. Again, there's a lot going on, a lot to talk about, but it was, it wasn't quite hitting it. Yeah, I was tired after the quali as well, to be honest. I was pretty shattered after that. I was like, wow, we've still got a Grand Prix. A whole Grand Prix coming up. And I'm glad, I'm glad the FIA, Formula One, made the sensible decision of moving everything forward, because the worst thing could have been a fully washed out Grand Prix. That would have been an absolute nightmare. We saw that in Spa in 2021. So yeah, it didn't gather any momentum in quali. But it was, yeah, you know what? All in all, fairly satisfied with qualifying. Going into a race that was, well, pretty interesting, wasn't it? Right, race result is as follows. Max Verstappen wins by a dominant Max Verstappen-esque margin, takes fastest lap as well, was banging in fastest laps, left, right and centre at the end, wasn't he? Like, honestly, and I put the greatest in the thumbnail, is this Max Verstappen's greatest ever race in Formula One? I know there will be some people who will be quick to dismiss that, oh, we only won because the red flag and even without that, yeah, it worked for him. But also, hang on, Red Bull could have pitted, but didn't. They decided that they played for the red flag. Fortunately for them, Franco Colapinto brought it out. Now, sure, luck can go in your favour, but even without that, Max's pace was unbelievable. And I think even without that, he's probably at least podium, probably winning the race. So yeah, I think this was probably, I want to do a little poll actually. I'll do another little poll. Was this Max Verstappen's greatest race? Because he was on a different planet. Like, the way he was making up positions, 7 positions gained in the first lap. The way he just drove past Lewis Hamilton. The move he put on Oscar Piastri. Now, of course, Oscar is, you think, oh, he's got to help out Lando. I thought Oscar thought that Max was far enough back that he didn't have to defend the inside, because Max pulled that exact same move on Esteban Ocon. And for all of the mistakes that were made throughout this race, right? People running wide, and many a mistake wasn't punished, but people running wide, blah, blah, blah. Like, wow. There was like, I didn't see Max put a foot wrong. Like, not going off track anyway. A couple of times he snatches a wheel and runs a little bit wide, but like, I don't remember seeing him go off track. Maybe I'm wrong. But I'll tell you what, that's crazy. Very, very good. 79% of you think this was Max's greatest race. And I feel like, considering the context of the situation, considering how badly qualifying went for him, super unlucky. The way he just cut through the field, and you see Checo, right? Checo starting ahead of Max and not even finishing the points, just kind of says it all, right? Max was on another level. And it's one of those instances when Max drives, when Max is angry and he drives in like a really controlled, clinical way. Yeah, you saw a little scrap with Charles, which is great because them two scrapping, Charles and Max scrapping is unbelievable. I love it. Right, we need more of that next year because when Charles and Max go toe to toe, them two, they know how to race each other because they know each other. They've been racing together for years, and I want to see Charles and Max head to head next year because that's going to be special. But yeah, the way Max just completely wipes the floor with everyone. And it's one of them where he made the difference. And again, Max has drawn a lot of criticism. And I think, again, that Mexico, turn at 7, that was a side of Max's driving that I don't like to see. But he's still the best driver in F1 because no one can pull performances out of a car like this. No one on the grid right now, can do what Max did today in their respective cars. I don't believe that at all. And yeah, it was a Jupiter's. I agree. It was a champion's drive from Max, and I mean the championship was done after Singapore. Like to me, that for him getting that P2 and not letting Lando open up a massive gap to him around a track that, by all accounts, was gonna be a real struggle for Max and Red Bull. That's when he won it. And you know what was actually really nice, right? Because Max hasn't won for ages. Not won a main race. He's obviously won the sprint. But seeing Max really be really gassed about a win at the end, it was actually really nice to see how much that race meant to him. Because I think there was a big build up, and again he felt like everything that could have gone against him in qualifying did, and he was obviously carrying the penalty as well. And for him to recover and just put in such an unbelievable performance, I think that was seeing Max that gassed and happy on the podium, it was actually really nice to see, genuinely. Happiest I've seen him since Abu Dhabi 21. Yeah, I probably agree with that, to be honest. I probably agree with that. Thank you, F1 Edits, by the way. Tommy, the best F1 YouTuber. Thank you very much. Very kind. Race Chinwag, legendary. Keep it up. Do you think Lando will win the championship next year? If not this year, I think we're seeing. Look, I've said this before. If I had to put money on it, who's going to outscore who of the McLaren 2 next year? I've said I think Piastri. I think Lando's quicker than Oscar, but there are, there's weaknesses in Lando's game as an F1 driver, and yeah, he got unlucky today. But I think the kind of drive that Max was able to put in today, that's what Lando's going to be going up against next year, and it's a tall order. Max is the best driver in F1, then it's Charles, then it's a bunch of the rest, right? As far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it's going to be a tall order, right? McLaren are going to have to turn up big time, because when Max is on his job, Max is on his job, and he was on his job today. Absolutely. Yes, but we have not even talked about Alpine. P2 and 3, Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly. Now, we were seeing some of this, weren't we? We got little hints of this. So the last few weekends, Gasly's gone Q3 in quali, sprint quali, and quali, going into this weekend, or including this weekend. Yeah, because he was in Q3 in both sprint and normal quali. So the signs were there that Alpine was turning into our gain positions in the championship. The warning signs were there, mainly with Pierre, and then obviously a bit of a chaotic qualifying with all the red flags, but they both managed to get through into Q3. Ocon's the one who capitalises most, and I mean they were good value for it, weren't they, when they were there? I mean, even before the red flag and before everyone started pitting, Ocon was right on the back of Tsunoda. You could see that Esteban had more pace in his Alpine than Yuki did in the Racing Bulls. Oh, did Gasly got Gasly got into Q3 3 times before that. Then there were definitely 3 Q3s in a row for Gasly. I'm just forgetting the most recent one. But either way, Gasly, unbelievable job. Ocon, unbelievable job. That has gone from 9th to 6th in the Constructors, which we'll get onto. Huge day for Alpine, and about time, because given their resource, given their essentially Renault works team still. I mean, what can I say? Like, that is... this is where they should have been in the first place, is what I'm trying to say, right? Alpine had a terrible start to the season, given the relative resource of Haas and Sauber and Williams particularly. This is where they should have been all along. It's about time you butt your ideas up, Alpine, and got yourself up into P6. So well done, but it's been a long time coming, right? It's been a hell of a long time coming. And then George Russell P4, close to Gasly at the end, but not quite. Charles had a very disappointing weekend. Disappointing weekend for both Ferraris, really, wasn't it? It was just not what we've come to expect over recent weekends from Ferrari. But at least Charles kept it clean, which can't be said for his teammate. Lando P6. We'll get on to Lando. We'll go team by team at the end. Lando. As soon as he went pole, you were like, oh no. This is like the worst place for Lando to be, because his record off pole speaks for itself. His record for pole speaks for itself. And then Yuki Tsunoda, P7, Liam Lawson, P9. The Red Bulls. Oh, Yuki P3 in qualifying, man. What could have been? Went on to the wet tyre as well and was looking quick. And Liam Lawson, shout out Liam. I think he did, kept Perez behind, kept Lewis behind as well. I think actually Liam had a pretty decent race. I was pretty impressed with Liam Lawson. And then Lewis Hamilton, probably the most I've ever seen him struggle in a Formula One car and reach the end of the race. Wow, this was a horrific weekend for Lewis. Apart from obviously doing the demo run in Senna's old McLaren, which was great vibes. But yeah, on track it was an absolute howler for Lewis. Not good. Then Checo, Behrman, Bottas, Alonso, Joe round out the finishers. And then Sainz, Colapinto, Albon, Stroll, Hulkenberg did not finish. Hulkenberg disqualified because the marshals helped push his car back onto the thing, right? Bosh. Okay, so where does that leave us driver standings wise? Because of course we are still waiting on the FIA decisions regarding Lando Norris, George Russell, Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda on the aborted start where they did not follow procedure. I'm assuming they will get penalties for this, but I don't know what. Maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe a fine. I don't really know. We're still I was hoping, push the stream a bit later, we'd know by now, but we don't know by now, which is annoying. Okay. So look, I'm just going as the results are now. Okay, as they are now, but they will probably change. I don't know why it's taken so long, because they put out some documents about an hour and a half ago. Some aborted start incident documents, and there's one for Yuki, one for Liam, one for George, one for Lando. Team representative required to report to stewards in relation to incident, aborted start incident. But we don't know anything more than that. I feel like it should be. I mean, it's one of them, innit? It's in the same way, right? Max's penalty for going under the delta. And, Yuki got a penalty. No, Yuki got a fine, I think, for going over the pit lane speed limit a couple of times. But it's these kind of penalties where it's black or white. And as far as I'm concerned, Lando, Yuki, Liam and George will get penalties. And they should get penalties because they broke a rule. And I don't know if McLaren said Lando could go or Lando just went. I don't know. I'm not sure. But either way, they're probably going to get penalties, which, well, obviously, if Lando and Yuki both get penalties, then they won't move relative to one another. But then obviously Oscar got a penalty. That's why he's down there. So I don't think it probably won't change. If they got 5 seconds, I don't think it will change anything. If Lando and Yuki and Liam and George might go behind Leclerc, I don't actually know. But probably 5, maybe a 10-second penalty. I mean, Max got a 5, didn't he, for the for the delta, the 0.63 of a second delta. So it'll probably be something like that, I imagine. Was a decision made on the Mercs removing air lemons? Thank you for the super chat. I don't know. That's another good question. Yeah, no, I don't believe it has it? Because, well, basically my understanding is that you are allowed to change the pressures, but the tyres aren't allowed to be on the car. So, like, it's not that the Mercedes were running illegal pressures or anything. It's just when they changed them, the tyres were still on the car rather than off the car, you know. But yeah, they're the race results. For now, they could change. I don't know if they're going to change massively. I'm not 100% sure. Like, it again depends on the amount of time. I've got a few super chats to catch up on, by the way. Thank you, Daniel. I watched that race on a 3-hour train in New Zealand with patchy service. Ouch. I don't know what was more unexpected, Alpine double podium or the Tommo hostile takeover of P1. Yes, I did. Yeah, had a good little chat with Tommy last night over on P1, which was fun. Mate, I don't envy that. 3 hours on a train in New Zealand. You got good trains in New Zealand, though. I remember I got a couple when I was over there a few years ago. But I hope you enjoyed the race. And I think Liam did, again, I think Liam did your nation proud. I think he did a very good job, actually. I was very impressed with Liam's defensive driving this weekend. Daniel, as well. Shout out Daniel, as always. Thoughts on Norris's saltiness? Yes. Lando had some... Oh, right. So you know what? Like, Lando trips himself up here, doesn't he? Because... what was the wording he used? There was like some interview where he was like, and the headline is like, it wasn't talent, it was luck, or something to that regard. And Lando was talking about how, because Lando spoke before about like not being a fan of the changing tyres under red flag rule, which, you know, I get why it's there, because you can say, well, what if people pick up damage? Because a red flag inherently is usually off the back of some kind of contact or some kind of damage. Then the argument to not change those tyres is there, and I get, like, okay, so if you got damage, then you shouldn't be punished for having picked up shrapnel, right? So shrapnel, like debris, should I say? If you pick up debris on your tyres, and then because of an incident, blah blah blah. Yeah, but at the same time, I think obviously he's annoyed because he was in, running P2. Looking good for the race. I mean, with Max's pace again, even without that red flag. But the same, like, Lando wanted to come in. Lando was asking to come in. George was like the opposite. George wanted to stay out, and then they came in, and it ended up not being the right time. But again, they only brought out the safety car because of Franco's crash. Sorry, not the safety car. They only brought out the red flag because of Franco's crash. So... Franco crashed under the safety car conditions. So, yeah, I like Lando. Just feel like he speaks himself into situations sometimes after the race, and it doesn't do him any favors, because it does just come across as a bit salty sometimes, and it gives these lines that. The media is going to lap it up. The fan base is going to lap it up. And, looking back on this race, the right man won. Like, the right man absolutely won this race. And Lando made too many mistakes. He lost position off the start. He ran wide a bunch of times. He got unlucky, granted, but the right man won today. And I think, it's... look, I think this is just... We talk about drivers' strengths and weaknesses, whether it's on track or off track, mindset, approach, all that. And I think this is one of these. If Oscar had been in, Oscar's prepared to run his mouth as well sometimes. Don't get me wrong, but I think that Oscar's really got a great approach from that point of view, and I feel like he's got that over Lando, in my opinion. And I think maybe we saw a bit of that in some of the presses after the race. I do think it gets a bit blown out of proportion, but at the same time he's not helping himself. Subdeep as well, thank you for the super chat. Hang on, I've clicked the wrong thing. Do you think Lando is the worst challenger ever? Look, I think Lando has proven many a time this year that he's not quite there yet and ready to go toe to toe with Max Verstappen. Max is far too good. And that's why I've not really been on board with this kind of there's a driver's championship narrative for a long time now, because yes, statistically, it's been possible, sure. But is it probable? You're asking for Max Verstappen to mess up so many times and Lando to fully capitalise when you've got a Ferrari that's been firing on all cylinders, not so much this week, of course, but the previous two. Charles been there, done that. He's been fighting at the front longer than Lando is. I think he's more equipped for a title fight. I think Charles was more equipped. I think Verstappen's more equipped. Honestly, I think if Mercedes pull their finger out, I think George is probably more equipped than Lando, which is not something I would have told you maybe like last year. But I think George has a real like killer instinct and mentality about him that I think would serve George really well in a title fight, and I hope Mercedes give him the car to do that. We obviously know Lewis Hamilton's equipped and he'll be in a Ferrari next year. And Oscar isn't equipped yet, and I think there is definitely a deficit in performance between Lando and Oscar, but Oscar, it's only his second season, so there is more theoretical room for him to grow and improve. So yeah, there's things Lando definitely needs to work on between now and next year, because I think like raw pace and it's like overlap, we've seen it many a time. Lando is rapid, but there's things I think he still needs to work on. I think that's pretty clear. He's been unlucky with some of these starts, but also it's like 7 out of 8 starts from pole is not led after the first lap or whatever. Like, I know stats like that don't tell the full story and the nuance, but it does still paint a picture, and not a particularly good one for him. Thank you, Gemini, as well. Rain equals out cars. It shows true driver pace. Yeah, and look, I think that's obviously, again, that's not literally true. If Max was in a Sauber, would he have won in this dominant fashion? Obviously not. But what it does do is it really punishes those who aren't confident in the package underneath them. And I think that was what was most impressive about Max's win for me. It's like he hasn't been happy with this Red Bull for quite a lot of this season. And yet we've got to, 4 races from the end. And in these super tricky conditions around, Interlagos is not an easy track. And he's just at one with this car. A car that hasn't been as consistent for these drivers. Like Lando in his McLaren Lando's been more consistently happy with the car underneath him than Max has. Yet Max just found a way to drive some unbelievable laps, and he's the best driver in F1. It just is, it just is. And if a day like today doesn't prove that, then I don't know how else he can prove that to you. Thank you, Daniel. After recent controversy, should FIA President Ben Sulayem consider resignation over the FIA's stance on drivers' language over team radio? Yeah, it's a funny hill to die on, isn't it? And it almost, I kind of look at the FIA in Formula One, and there's almost like a power struggle there, isn't there? Domenicali and Ben Sulayem. You almost look at that, the power struggle like Horner to Marco, like the Horner and the Uvidias and the tyre side of the business, and then the Austrian side of the business. And there's kind of this resistance there, and they've got to work together, but they seem to often disagree on how to go forward. And it feels like Formula One and the FIA is kind of a similar thing. So, look, would Ben Sulayem stepping back change I don't know, does he run the FIA with like an iron fist, like in a tyrannical kind of way? I assume he doesn't. If you replace Ben Sulayem, do you just get another person who has similar, values and principles and wants to push for the same things? Like, I don't know, right? Getting rid of it's like in football, right? Getting rid of the manager doesn't necessarily change things if you're going to keep the same backroom staff, and if the players have more power than the manager, then getting a new manager isn't going to change it, blah, 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 right? So, but yeah, it just, the storylines we've been seeing, like Matt's getting penalised and then Charles seemingly not, but then he is now getting penalised. But then is that only because of the backlash? Because people are like, well, why are you fining Max for swearing about his car? Which is not directing that at anyone. Like, it's not malicious swearing. It's just expressing himself. Which is, it's just, what, I don't know why the FIA are trying to just let the drivers be human. And actually, you know, on the radio, it's Formula One who are deciding what radios to broadcast. So let the drivers swear, let them be human. They're like, they're under like so much pressure in these like cockpits driving 200 miles an hour. Like, what do you expect? You know? Ridiculous. Thank you, BC, as well, for the super chat. The lack of British media in the press conference showed the bias is real. Yeah, I saw Max had a... Max is hilarious, man. He's quality. He was like the first, like, where's all the British media? Now, obviously, I don't know who was and wasn't there, okay? I don't know who exactly he's referring to. Because I know you get, there's BBC... I can't remember the fella's name. I can't remember his name, but he's like the BBC Formula One head person. I guess you've got like Autosport and some of the papers, I guess, in the UK. But that is actually quite funny. That is quite funny. And I'm assuming Max is looking around and looking for those. Oh, there's British media sources. Where are they? Oh, they're not here. I love that. Like, come on, that's just funny. That is prime. Like, that's what I love about Max, man. He's so real. Like, there's not a single driver. Honestly, there's not a single driver on the grids right now, including Alex Albon, that I'd rather go and have a pint with than Max Verstappen, because he's just like real. And I didn't agree with his turn 7 move in Mexico, but that's by the by, right? Because he's just a proper, and it's things like that. You're just like, yeah, he's not changed a bit. Off track Max is like unbelievable. I couldn't say a bad word about off track Max. I really couldn't. I don't love always driving on track, but you know, you can say the same about like Schumacher or Senna or whatever. These drivers, Ocon, prime example, right? I think Ocon's story is amazing. I think I really respect how he got into the sport, coming from a background that, you know, it just doesn't happen. Can he drive like a bit of a dick sometimes? Of course he can. But, you know, these are two separate things as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, Susan, as well, for the super chat. Shout out to Renault Engine this week. Yes, shout out the Renault Engine. Imagine, right? This is the thing, right? If Renault, which, I mean, they won't from 26 onwards, had a power unit that was as powerful as the rest and didn't have this, was it 20 horsepower deficit, I want to say. I feel like that's what Otmar said. There's about a 20 horsepower deficit in their car. Imagine if they didn't have that deficit. Like, their chassis is actually probably about as good as Aston Martin's, but it's just, if you're lacking the power, then what can you do? Thank you, Gladiator. You've been very generous today, everyone. Appreciate you supporting what I do. Yeah, very kind. Norris proving today that it was completely unreasonable for Piastri to be forced to give up the sprint win. Norris fans complain about Hungary and Monza when it's really days like today that cost Norris more. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that Lando hasn't been able to take this championship potential fight, which, what was the gap from Miami was the same as the gap like a few races ago, right? He's not been able to absolutely rubber stamp it. Also, McLaren have been dicking about too much, being like, oh, like, we'll swap positions at the end because it's not the McLaren way. Like, just enforce team orders in a clear, concise way, or don't do it. And like, again, I said this, right? I said this after the sprint. I wish that VSC had dropped earlier. A, because I think it should have. And actually, I was having there's a podcast I've done with Mr. V, which will be coming out fairly soon, spoiler alert. And we were chatting about that. And he actually had a really good idea. Like, maybe as soon as a driver disconnects their belt, there's something that triggers a thing that allows the race director to be like, boom, VSC. Because A VSC neutralizes the race. It maintains the gaps between cars. It doesn't close the field up. It maintains the gap between cars, even if you just need it for like 10, 20 seconds to get a driver out of harm's way, and then you let them crack on. Like, something like that, I think, should have been done. But also, it should have happened because then it would have taught McLaren a lesson to stop trying to be fancy and faffing about. And, oh, we're McLaren, we don't do team orders. Shut up. Just do it or don't do it. Move on, okay? It really bugs me that they're trying to be slick with it and trying to like hide it and make it look like the McLaren way. Stop, okay? Stop faffing about. You're meant to be a serious Formula One team, okay? They need to learn from stuff like that because they could and should have really, I think, got, not punished as, points and off, but like Oscar should have won that race, right? It would have just been so funny. It would have been good. But yes, McLaren not helping themselves, and yeah, Norris making too many mistakes this year. Sai, thank you for the super chat. Verstappen, unbelievable. Ocon and Gasly's fourth podiums might have saved their season, and the rookies struggled a little. They did, didn't they? Yeah, I think conditions like that, even Lewis and Fernando, the two most experienced drivers out there, had many an incident. Obviously, Fernando crashing in qualifying, having his fair share of going off track, and Lewis as well. So it was always going to be uphill struggle. That's why I was extra impressed with Lawson, to be honest, because he kept it pretty clean and he was having pretty continuous pressure from Perez and Hamilton. Pardon me, that was not very nice. Continuous pressure from them two. So yeah, I think that gives Liam extra prop from my point of view. Whereas obviously Colapinto and Behrman both had their struggles. And thank you, Harshift, as well. What do you think about Lando's comments about the win having everything to do with luck and not talent? Well, look, what I would say, right, is, and I'm not gonna tell you what Lando said. Go watch back what Lando actually said, and don't just read the headline, because I don't think Lando is being as diva-y as the headlines suggest, but he is definitely being a bit salty, right? And yeah, this happened. What was it when he was with Lewis in the post race in the cool down room, and then Lewis was like, "Oh, your car was quick today," like complimenting, and Lando was like, "Well, your car was quickest for like 7 years." Lando just needs to that's not helping his cause, right? Little comments like these, and it's another one there, right? It's not as bad as people make it. People have to make it out to be this massive, like, oh my God, he's like, but, and that's too much, right? But at the same time, like, and he's human, right? And he's going to express himself, and he wears his heart on his sleeve, okay? And that's important to take into account. But again, if he just doesn't make these kind of comments, it will just stop these pylons that are often occurring, right? Because I think Lando's catching a lot of strays at the minute, and as much as, again, I think a lot of it's unfair. A lot of it's way over the line. Like, come on, this is racing at the end of the day. It's sport. Like, chill out. Like, people who get way too deep into like attacking athletes because they're not part of their favourite sport team. Like, get a life, grow up. Like, come on, it's ridiculous. But I think there's a lot of genuine criticism of Lando, which comes from him in part just making these little jabs and digs. It's just, I think he needs to work on that, in my opinion. Thank you, Lord Uzik. Boy, I thought Lando had a nightmare, and then I saw the Stroll clip. Oh, if you haven't seen the Stroll clip, then go and look it up. I retweeted the Stroll clip, actually, so go onto my Twitter at Tommo McCluskey if you want to watch that. I don't know what to say, actually. I just lost all my brain. I don't know what Lance was thinking, because he was already rolling backwards, and he could have just carried on rolling backwards until he had the space to then put left hand down and accelerate out of it and then just come to the... But instead he's like, oh, I can just carry momentum through the gravel trap. Now, Lance is an F1 driver and has been since 2017, right? So he's very experienced. I don't know what he was... He obviously thought, oh, I can just drive through the gravel trap. In wet conditions? I mean, I don't know, mate. I know you've got Inters on, which have a bit of tread, but you're not exactly driving a, Jeep Cherokee, are you? I don't know. I don't know what went through Lance's mind in that moment. But it was not good, was it? Not good. Thank you, Dan, as well. The phase out drive is over. The phrase. Sorry. The phrase out drive is overused. Max showed this. Yeah, out driving the car. I mean, look, we use phrases and words to express what we want and our feelings and our emotions. Obviously, you can only drive within the if you put F1 cars on a TAS, okay, time assisted speed run. If you know virtual Trackmania, you see the TAS is on there, right? A TAS would show the absolute prime optimal, right? You could do a TAS of F1, the F1 game, or any sim, right? The TAS run is the optimal that is possibly theoretically achievable. Well, that's what 100% is meant to mean, right? I don't know, people get. Max drove closer to the ceiling of his car than anyone else did today, and I think the closer you can get to the ceiling of your car, that's the real driver ratings, right? From the best driver in F1 to the worst driver, is which driver gets closest to 100% most often, right? And then average that number out over 24 races, and then you've got your best driver, your 10th driver in the middle, and then your worst driver. That's how you would ideally kind of work it out. And yeah, I mean, yeah, Max's performance today was just ridiculous. He made it look like prime 2023 all over again, even though we know, that's the difference. We know the McLaren and the Ferrari, not so much this weekend, right? But they are very, very close, right? And between the Red Bull and the McLaren and the Ferrari, you can go to any different track and, one's going to have a slight advantage over the other two, maybe, blah, blah, blah. We know it's close. In 2023, Max, there was a car advantage there, for sure. But this year there isn't, yet Max made it look like there was a car advantage, and that kind of speaks most to just how impressive that was. Thank you, Zach, as well. If you had to choose who's the third best driver, oh, God, Zach, you're putting me on the spot here. Well, yeah, so obviously Max and Charles are my two. Who's the third best driver in F1? I think there's George makes mistakes. He's kind of, George is like Charles was maybe a couple of years ago. There's mistakes creeping a little bit too much. So I realised this Chinwag's gone way off piste, but you know what? We're running with it, and it's going to be a long one. So buckle up, because we've not even done predictions or bangers and clangers or any of that. I'd say right now, form-wise, I mean, Carlos had a bad weekend, didn't he? And he's been having some good ones recently. George has been probably form right now. Lando's quick over a lap, but he has been making these mistakes. And I don't know, I just feel like, again, if I had to pick George or Lando to be in my car of my theoretical team for the 2025 season, I think I would pick George. I think I would. It's not Lewis. Lewis has been really struggling. Fernando's not having a great time. Again, Sainz, good. Mexico, bad this weekend. Probably on form, I might actually go with George. Hulkenberg has had a slump, right? But first half of the season, I would have put Hulkenberg there probably. But I think George has been pretty good as of late. I don't know. I'm not dying on any hill, all right? Before anyone tries to, Tommo said George is the third best era. Shut up. Thank you, Gladiator, as well. 2:30 race start here in Australia. Ended at 5. Wow, that's when you should be getting REM sleep. That's like prime sleeping time. Kind of worth at least, but exhausted now. Can we talk about Williams? Sargent must have felt his ears burning. Yeah, well, I think Colapinto had a obviously bad weekend, and like someone said in Super Chat earlier, right? It's when you've got that little experience, a weekend like this, when it's a wet Interlagos and it's been resurfaced badly, clearly, you know, it's going to be a uphill fight. So, fair, like you give concessions for that, right? You give Colapinto a concession for that, and Albon. I know. I feel like Alex said that he felt like maybe something went wrong with the car. To be honest, watching it, it just felt like driver error because quite a lot of people locked their rear axles this weekend. Stroll obviously did a different corner, right? But locking a rear axle was not a one-off occurrence, you know. So I don't know. I don't know if that was car or driver error. I reckon it was probably more driver, but I could be wrong. Thank you, Kiefer, as well for the super chat. Did you hear the crazy rumour now about Carlos going to Red Bull and Franco staying at Williams in 25? I mean, what's changed? Like, because Red Bull didn't go for Sainz in the first place for whatever reason, and you know, there's plenty of people who say, oh, it's because Max's camp didn't want Carlos, blah blah blah. Maybe, we don't know. Like, you know, is the idea of Max leaving Red Bull, you know, for Aston Martin or Mercedes in 2026, meaning that, you know, Red Bull have got to think about life after Max, not just who can be number two, and in which case that could be Carlos. Like, you know, I don't know. They would have to really make it, because, yeah, Colapinto's been really good, but Carlos Sainz is a known entity, and he's like a figurehead, and he can help push that Williams team forward in terms of car development. He's like an engineer, right? So it would take a big payoff from Christian Horner to James Vowles, I think, to get Carlos out of that contract before he even starts. And it would go against the ambition that Williams have shown to get Carlos in the first place. But obviously, Red Bull selling it to Carlos, like, we're probably going to lose Max at the end of 25, which, again, I don't know. Right? Maybe it won't happen, but if I had to put money on it today, I would. And we're getting you to, like, lead that team from 26 onwards. That's a different sell, isn't it, than just we're getting you in to be Max's teammate, which, yeah, Max does what he does to teammates because he's that good. So, Flummer, thank you for your super chat. I have already addressed Lando's comment about luck, not talent, by the way. So, I just think read the full quote and then come to your own opinion about it. And Lando talks himself into holes and doesn't do himself any favours. That's basically the long and short of it. Right. We've been on this driver standing graphic for a very long time. The team standings are as follows. Oh, and by the way, I'm just going to refresh all the tyre pressure checks. Those things have been updated. Infringement. Oh, it's fines. Fines. Okay. So they just got fines. Did Mercedes. I'm just looking on the FIA website now. George Russell, yeah. Fine of €5,000 for George's car and for Lewis's car. So 10 grand in fines for Mercedes, nothing more than that as far as I can see. Yeah. Which, look, they didn't gain any advantage from it, so I don't really care. And it's the difference between having the tyres on the car and not on the car. They got a fine. Whatever. So team standings are as follows. 36 points. McLaren are ahead of Ferrari. And Ferrari 13 points ahead of Red Bull. Again, we don't know about Lando and Liam and Yuki and George's naughtiness off the start, the aborted start, but this is as things stand right now, and there's still no update as far as I can see. And then Mercedes 382, 162 points behind Red Bull. Aston Martin 86, Alpine 49. 49 points. Crazy. 49 points. Man. Alpine cooked. And that's worth a lot of money, you know? That's what. We don't know exactly how much money each position in the Constructors is worth. 12 million euros, something like that, I reckon. You read different sources, they give you different numbers. I know the word 50 mil was bounded about a lot on the Sky feed, but I don't reckon it's that much personally. They don't know. I don't know. But I reckon it's about 12.5 mil per position, euros. So probably about 35, 40 mil. Could be less, could be more. 30 mil on F1 TV. There you go. I mean, F1 TV saying 30 mil, Sky Sports saying 50 mil. That's a pretty big range. And that's a roundabout way saying we don't know. No one's got a Scooby. So, but either way, it is still a big payday for Alpine. So well done them. But yeah, there's only 5 points separating P6, 7 and 8. Ooh, you got to say right now, I mean, again, this wasn't a one-off for Alpine. It was in terms of double podium, but Gasly's been knocking on the door of Q3 quite consistently, right? There's been an Alpine in Q3 the last 4 quali sessions in a row or whatever. So Alpine have found something. Haas weren't great this weekend, but they were very strong last weekend. I don't know who I'm going to... I mean, it's going to be... You can't see... In Vegas, I can't see it being as crazy. I can't see another race being as crazy, right? In Vegas, Qatar, or Abu Dhabi as this one. I'll probably say Alpine hold on. I could see Lawson... I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see how that goes down to the wire. Alpine Haas Racing Bulls. I honestly couldn't predict that, to be honest. But bad day for Williams, because this firmly puts them in P9. Nothing better. Not good. Thank you, Footy Animator, for the super chat. Do you think that Stroll's going to get dropped? Look, the only chance Lance Stroll gets dropped is if Lawrence Stroll can convince Max Verstappen to join Aston Martin in 2026, because then, surely, even at the sake of your own son, right, who, bear in mind, right, Lance can go and cook him wek, right, for a couple of years, right, while you give Fernando Alonso 2026 and maybe 2027 alongside Max Verstappen as teammates at Aston Martin. Imagine all of the eyeballs and all the rigmarole if you got Max and Alonso at the same team. Unbelievable vibes, unbelievable attention, right? It would be massive. Let Stroll go and do some world endurance for a couple of years, take a couple of years off, and then, look, Alonso retires, fine. If you want to bring him back in, Lawrence, you own the team, right? Do it. Maybe a couple of years in WEC will make Lance Stroll a better driver, and so that he's actually considered more being here on merit rather than just being here because of his dad. I feel like there's not many driver pairings that will entice Lawrence to consider dropping his son. But I think Fernando and Max at Aston Martin would be one of them. That would be so sick. Alonso at the end of his career with Max Verstappen in his prime in an Aston Martin designed by Adrian Newey. Love it. And thank you, Skyler, as well, for the super chat. Very kind. Appreciate that. But yeah, team standings are as such. And still not looking good for Red Bull. Checo still didn't score a point today, which is pretty crazy. Seen a few of you saying Carlos got a reprimand. Not sure what for, but apparently Carlos got a reprimand, so that's the thing. Why is my keyboard not working? I had DFI website open earlier, but now it's just decided to close. So I'm not going to worry about that for now, because I'm live here on YouTube. Thank you all for being here, by the way. 3,700 of you, a lot more than usual. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Don't forget to like the stream if you're enjoying it. Enjoy my washed opinions, and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you are subscribed. If you're listening audio only, rate 5-star, all that good stuff. Right? Appreciate you all being here. Right. Predictions time. Reflecting on pre-race predictions, because of course we do our stream on the Wednesday before the race, going over what we think will happen this weekend. And we've not done great. I've done particularly bad here because I did kind of predict Max would have a clanger. And 82% of you think this is Max's greatest race of his entire career. So, as clangs go, that's a pretty Lomo moment. Yeah, I think a mega Lomo. I hate the use of that word, mega. It gets banded around far too much. but I will accept that is a mega Lomo moment, okay? Also, I put Aston Martin as banger team. What? And Williams, okay, Williams, Williams didn't do too much wrong themselves. They gave Alex a car he could get to Q3 in. It's just their drivers kept crashing. So I felt harsh giving myself the point for Williams here. But at the same time, they both retired. So maybe it should be half a point. But yeah, Fernando Alonso banger. No, he had a messy race. And Charles Leclerc race winner. No, Ferrari were not at the races. Give it half a point. I mean, okay, maybe I'll give myself half a point then. Okay, you lot didn't do much better. Okay, well done. You put Checo clanger and he had a clanger. Like that's just like putting Sauber's clanger and trying to pat yourself on the back for it. So I'm sorry, chat. I don't think there's much. There's much for you to take from that, you know? Like, if you want to be happy about it, be happy about it, okay? If you want to be happy about it. Ferrari banger, no. Red Bull clanger, no. Banger drive Lewis, definitely not. Race winner Lando Norris, definitely not. So yeah. Checo didn't even do that bad. Jack, are you... Really? Really? Checo didn't even do that bad? I'm not sure about that. I'm not... But yeah, you win 1 to 0.5. Easy win. Well done, you. I hope you're proud of yourself, okay? Because I'm not. Right. Bangers and clangers time. Banger drive this weekend. Max drove great, but a very overlooked drive, and I'm giving it to Joe. No, I'm joking. It's Max. Of course it's Max. Of course it's Max. 82% of you think that was Max's greatest race of his career, and I am inclined to agree because the way he made himself look like he looked like he was in a different formula, and he made it look like 2023, even though we know these cars are not that different anymore. It's fun. It's fun to debate with you. Like, it's fun. Bang and drive, Max. Great job. Smashed it. Winners. You know what? The only shame is that drive kind of deserved to be, because Max is obviously going to win the championship now. But it's like, because it's not mathematically done, he couldn't really go all in and celebrate. And like, for Max not to have won a main race for as long as he has, and have such a difficult qualifying and carrying this penalty, if this race had both like won him the race and won him the championship, that would have been even better. Like, just from a vibes point of view, because we all know it's done now, but it's like he couldn't fully go in and like, yeah, I've done it. That would have been cool, but not to be. So my banger drive, Max Verstappen. Your banger drive, 2,412 of you voted, so thank you very much for voting. Your banger drive is Max. 84% of the vote, 10% of you Esteban Ocon, 3% of you Pierre Gasly. I know it doesn't add up to... Tommo, it doesn't add up to 100. Yeah, I know, but all the other votes had such tiny amounts spread over all the drivers. It's not even point putting it in the graphic, all right? Shut up. I see your comment before you wrote it, right? 84% Max Verstappen, 10% Esteban Ocon, 3% Pierre Gasly. Fantastic job from the Alpine boys today, and the Alpine boys and girls working at the factory as well. Fair play to them. They've had a difficult year this year, and finally, all right, with all that Renault investment, this is where they should have been already, okay? But yeah, well done, Max. 84% of the vote. I'm surprised it wasn't more. But credit where credit is due for the Alpines. Absolutely. Right. Clanger drive for me, Lance Stroll. Look, there were many drivers who could have got this. I think Lewis had an appalling weekend. Like, this is the most I've ever seen him struggle, probably in his entire career in a race. Like, it was really bad. And sure, the Mercedes, difficult car, but at the end of the day, George was able to find a way of driving that Mercedes and a setup within that Mercedes that almost got him on the podium. Look, listen, there's reasons, sure, it's not a good car, right? It doesn't work with Lewis, but George is almost getting on the podium. Those excuses only go so far. Sometimes you just got to accept that, you know what, maybe my driver just wasn't on it this weekend, and Lewis was not on it this weekend at all. Clanger drive for me was Lance Stroll. Clanger drive for you. And, right, so I'll put these polls out on Google, right? Google form, put it out beforehand. There were two drivers who excelled in this poll. Driver A got 881 votes, which was 36.9%. Driver B got 882 votes, which was 37%. So, and as far as I've got the poll set up, once you've submitted it, you can't see what other people have done. So I don't believe this poll can really be manipulated with, in terms of, because you can't see, oh, that person's winning, so I'm going to downvote them and try and get blah, blah. So there's literally one vote in it. And the winner of your Clanger drive for the 2024 Brazilian Grand Prix is Lando Norris. 37% of the vote. Lance, 36.9, but I round it up. I round it to the nearest whole number. Perez, 5%. Carlos Sainz, 5%. Now, again, it doesn't add up. Look, okay. Objectively, there were worse drives, obviously, than Lando. Albon didn't even make the race because he wrote off his car in qualifying. Colapinto crashed twice. Sainz crashed twice. But in the context of the championship, I understand why people might vote for that. It obviously wasn't the worst drive of the weekend, obviously, but yeah, it wasn't. Things went wrong, didn't they? Sorry, you do realise, right? If these numbers don't add up, that means that there are people who voted for other drivers, and therefore that's the reason the numbers don't add up. And I'm not going to put all 20 drivers in each category. You're just winding me up now. Stop baiting me. I keep taking the bait, right? Banger team is Alpine, obviously, and you've also gone Alpine. 97% of the vote. Tommo, that's not 100%. Why are there no other teams there? Because they're like so insignificant. It's not worth me putting it on. Okay. And then my Clanger team. As much as I didn't give myself the point for Williams, it kind of is Williams, because not only did both of their drivers actually even start the race, and Colapinto crashed twice, they now have no spare parts. Alpine have jumped them comfortably, which means they're really kind of nowhere in the Constructors. They're ninth, all on their own. So as much as Williams as a team didn't do much wrong, their drivers gave them more to do than any. So it's harsh to attribute Clang to Williams as an organisation. However, because their drivers crashed multiple times, and because of Alpine having an absolute worldie, it kind of is Williams, isn't it, Clanger? So yeah, two things can be right at the same time, and yeah, I just felt like Williams didn't deserve the full double barrel of the shotgun. You know, just one barrel, okay? Because the drivers gave them a lot of work to do in there for the old pit crew, especially on the end of a triple header as well, which is because where most of the teams, they're all based in Europe, right? They're still carrying jet lag from Austin, probably, right? So it's been a big ask of the team personnel this weekend, and for Williams to come out with so little and for Alpine to gain so much, it's not good. And then finally, your clanger team is Williams, 38% of the vote, 29% of the votes in McLaren, which, yeah, again, look, considering the pace they had in the sprint to only finish P6 and P8 is not great. Aston Martin, 16% of the vote. I mean, they kind of turned it into a test session. Alonso only finished the race because out of respect for the team rebuilding the car, because his back was shot to pieces. So fair play to Fernando. And then 7% Haas. Yeah, again, given their momentum as of late, this was a bad weekend for them. Yeah, I mean, look, that race was crying out for a K-Mag, man. Like, K-Mag chaos was built for this weekend. But, you know, he was sick, bless him. So he wasn't up for it. God, 5,500 of you voted in that poll. Crazy numbers. Cool, excellent. Right, we've gone through all the bangers and clangers. Those are mine. Those are mine. These are yours. So the same, but you went Lando over Lance by literally one vote. What would I have, if they both got the same vote? I would have had to do some like really creepy face split between the two of them. If more of you have voted for Lance, then you would have got the creepy face split. But you didn't, so that's your own fault. Right. Team by team. Let's quickly go through, not quickly. Right? We've only been going for just over an hour. It feels like longer than that, but there you go. There you go. You missed the poll, Tyler. It's not good enough, Tyler. Sorry, Tyler. It's not good enough. Just before I do, Skylar, thank you very much for the super chat. Brazil showed how Lando will never be World Drivers' Champion. He openly complained how Max had the best car in 22, then doesn't capitalise when he had the same. Yeah, look, I said it earlier, right? When he had his little snarky comment to Lewis about, you know, you had the quickest car for years, blah, blah, blah. It almost makes you look back on what Max did in 23 and what Lewis did for years in the Mercedes and be like, you know what? They made it look easy, but actually, it's not necessarily that easy. And making it look easy is almost sometimes, I feel like when a driver really dominates and you get the fatigue amongst the fan base and then you kind of take it for granted. That's why like Max would never win Driver of the Day in 2023 because, well, it's just Max winning because it's just easy, right? But he made it look easy. That's the difference. And yeah, like Lando, you know, I think McLaren over the course of the entire season was it the fastest car at the start of the year? No, I don't believe it was. And it's not the fastest car every weekend, but I would say over the course of the 21 races we've had so far, the McLaren has been the quickest car. And yeah, again, Lando's not capitalised. And to be honest, like Lando said it himself, right? Max is the best driver in F1 right now. I don't think there's much argument against that, in my opinion. So he is going against the best. Like fair enough. If he comes up short, then, well, you come up short to Max Verstappen. It's like, well, okay, I tried. Like, Max is literally the best. So, you know, but yeah, I think I don't think he's ready. He's not as up and ready and prepared for a title fight as Max is, as Charles is. Definitely them two. I would, you know, have more faith in mounting a title championship fight over Lando. Maybe even George as well, to be honest. Because he's impressed me as of late. Just the way he's been able to really like establish. And I know Lewis is leaving, and there's a lot of context to why like Lewis might be struggling more than George, but still, man, like, come on. No, George is cooked as of late, definitely. Thank you, Hop Hayes, as well. Hey, Lomo. Hello, Lop Hayes. Would you ever do a live show? Sorry. Would you ever do a live show from Indy 500 at the newly renovated museum? Oh, I'd love to. That'd be unbelievable. Imagine that. I mean, Indy 500 for me is like up there. Honestly, I would. For me, I'd pick the Indy 500 over the Le Mans 24, which might be sacrilege to some of you, and I'm sorry if you're disappointed, but that's how I feel. I just feel like the Indy 500 would just That'd be so sick. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't turn down an opportunity to go to Le Mans 24, but if I had to pick between the two, I'd pick the Indy 500. So, yeah, that'd be sick. It's like when I did my live stream from... Does anyone remember when I did my post-race from Miami in 2022, which is quite cool? Got old Gallagher on with me from the 8 Sleep motorhome. That was fun. Because these kind of streams, if I've got a good internet connection, I could kind of do it from anywhere, really. And that would be sick. But yes, anyway, Alpine. Finally, it's just Alpine because they dropped the L. Ollie Oaks, not the terrible soap on British TV. Ollie Oaks. Well done. There has definitely been a step in performance in this car, again, particularly in the hands of Pierre, over recent weeks and his pretty consistent Q3 appearances. And yeah, I mean, look, it's well done. Finally, it's about time. That's ultimately, the reason Alpine were catching so many strays is because this is Renault. Like, this is Renault. Can have Alpine on the car all you like. This is a works team. For them to have been sitting P9 for as long as they were, embarrassing. This is where they should be. This is the bare minimum for a team with that infrastructure and that experience and having their own engine. And they've been like, this is P6 is where P6 should be the bare minimum. That's what I'm trying to say here, right? Because it wasn't that long ago. I remember when Oscar, decided on his move from Alpine to McLaren. It wasn't, it was a genuine conversation to be like, has he made the right choice here? Because Alpine are a works team and McLaren and Alpine are pretty similarly rated. And then obviously McLaren had a really bad start to 2023, and you're like, hang on a second. Don't know. And then zoop, flips on its head. And Alpine are nowhere. But finally they've cooked, and it's good to see that, because, Ocon, Esteban's good in the wet, Pierre's good in the wet. I don't really know it. I said this before, I don't think any of the drivers are bad in the wet. I don't think that's the case at all. But yeah, I think Alpine have, they've got a good thing with Gasly, and I think Doohan, I feel good about Jack Doohan. I hope he's going to be more of a Colapinto than a Sargent. We don't know. It doesn't feel like, there's too much of a correlation between F2 performance and F1 performance. But obviously Doohan has been part of the Alpine family for a long time now. He's done a lot of mileage in that car. So there's good reason to believe that he will do well. Let's go to the McLaren section, because I'm seeing in the live chat 5k fine for Lando. Interesting. So I imagine, is this for the aborted start thing? Oh yeah, Carlos Sainz has been reprimanded for potentially dangerous driving in the wake of his crash. There's the FIA revealed the near miss Marshall said. Oh yeah, because I do remember that when Sainz like, he crashed, but then he drove away, and there were marshals like right beside him. So I'm assuming that's what that was about. But yeah, Norris has got a €5,000 fine. The driver left the grid, although the aborted start signal before the aborted start signal was given. I'm surprised. Look, again, like I said about the Mercedes thing, like, it's one of them that I would have just assumed he'd have got a penalty, to be honest. Even though it's like, did he gain any performance from it? Obviously not. But it's one of those rules that, I don't know, I would have just assumed he would have got a penalty. He didn't. I think he can count his lucky stars for that, to be honest. But I don't think that would have... Because if he'd have got a 5 second, he still would have finished ahead of Tsunoda. What's the gaps at the end, actually? So if Lando gets a 5 second penalty, he's still obviously Yuki would have also got a 5 second penalty. Oh yeah, but even with a 5 second, Lando still finishes ahead of Oscar. Even with a 10 second, Lando still finished ahead of Oscar. And and so Lawson got it as well. So it's Lewis. Lewis is the closest driver to Lando who didn't have some kind of penalty, right? Because obviously Oscar got his 10-second for taking out Lawson. And Lewis finished about 19 seconds behind Lando. So I see a few of you, British bias. Like, well, they could have just, if they gave Lando a penalty, it wouldn't have changed the outcome. So how would the FIA? I just want to deconstruct this whole, like, right, Lando and Yuki and Liam and George getting a reprimand. I just want to understand how that is British bias when a 5-second penalty, because they could have made an example out of them, and it wouldn't have changed where Lando finished if they'd have given him a 5-second or a 10-second, right? I'm just trying to understand how that is British bias when also a Japanese driver and a New Zealander also got it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's the federation. It international Angleterre? No, that's I, isn't it? It's Inglaterra. Is it Inglaterra in Spanish or Angleterre? I don't know. A or an I, whatever. To me, what he did is disqualification worthy. Yes, Luciano, disqualify them. Get rid of him. It is Inglaterra. Oh, Anglo means English. Oh, yeah, there you go. Federation International Anglo, because England. There you go. No, it is Inglaterra. Anyway, so, the good thing is, for me anyway, what's most important for me is none of these graphics have to change, which is great. Because remember, I thought Max was going to get a penalty for his VSC transgression, and he did. And I did the graphics preemptively, and I was correct. And I've also assumed that, to be fair, I did think he'd get a penalty, but I didn't think it'd necessarily change position when you actually look at it. So I've kind of lucked out, to be honest. Yeah, I kind of got lucky there. But we move. You did hear Kiwi, Pondon. You did hear Kiwi. George 5K as well. God, where's all this money going to go? All these fines? For Mercedes, for George, for Lando, for Yuki, for Liam. Where's all this money going? I want some of it. But yes, we'll talk about McLaren anyway. So, Lando did not... off the start, it wasn't bad, the initial getaway. It was that second phase, which often seems to be the problem for Lando / McLaren. It's that second phase of acceleration. George just kind of took past him. Obviously, the inside line is P2 as well. So George had that covered, and obviously them two were breaking away at the start. Again, Max was just the rate of knots he was making his way through the field. It was only when he came up to the Sonoda Ocon Charles train that he kind of struggled to get past, and did eventually get past Charles. McLaren. Look, I've already gone on about how I think their approach to team orders is just ridiculous and a bit embarrassing. I think that Oscar is still, he made his mistake in qualifying, which did mean he started P8. And it's not the first, over recent weekends, as much as he, put it on pole in the sprint and should have won the sprint, he did win the sprint effectively, right? He does also have a mistake in him. The mistake he made in Mexico qualifying, the mistake he made in qualifying this weekend, which then robs him of it doesn't rob him, he robs himself of the opportunity to finish higher, where his pace... And look, I think these are the kind of things the mistakes he needs to iron out and work on. I think that he's getting there. And again, second year in F1 right now, going into his third next year. I think they're in a good place with Oscar. He's not the finished article, but the thing is, neither is Lando. And Lando's got less of an excuse because he's been around for a lot longer. And again, look, no one can question Lando's pace and his ability. I think he does make mistakes, and wasn't the cleanest drive from him today. No kind of big errors, but running wide off that was quite a big error, wasn't it? It was running wide off the restart, and then just a few other little errors knocking about. I think that, yeah, he's just not the finished article. I think Charles is the finished article, and I think Charles is the best chance at fighting Max for a title next year. I do, because I think he is the closest driver to Max in terms of form ability right now. Lando's still got stuff to work on, and yeah, I think it's difficult because I think Lando wears his heart on his sleeve, right? And I think that should be that as a principle I like, right? And I think Max wears his heart on his sleeve. I think Lewis wears his heart on his sleeve. I think a lot of these drivers do feel like they're very genuine with their feelings. And you might not always agree with their feelings. That's different. But being real and honest and genuine with their feelings, right? Whereas other drivers, I think George is a good example. He's a bit more closed off. I don't think you always get. And look, he's entitled to, all the drivers are entitled to go about things how they want to. And I think it's the off-track stuff that, I spoke about this actually in the Patreon chat after the sprint. And I know obviously there was those comments from Helmut Marko, right? About Lando's, I can't remember the exact quote. And look, I don't know what Helmut was, because Lando's works a lot with Mind, like mental health charity, and I think there's a lot of good work Lando does, right? And Lewis has spoken about his mental health, and all the drivers, right, that will go through these things. But I think it's important to remember there's a distinction here, right, between, and I'm not sure what Helmut was getting at, right? I'm giving benefit of the doubt. It's that performance elite mentality, not mental health, performance elite mentality that certain athletes, doesn't matter what the sport is, the mindset, your approach, your ability to control your emotions, your ability to get the most out of yourself every time you take part in your sport. That is everything. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And I think Max has this mindset where, you roll Max up, and Max has been very rolled up as of late because there's been a lot of scrutiny, a lot of pressure. And he raced today unbelievably, right? And we've seen that before. What was it? When, after Singapore last year, Max came back in Suzuka and wiped the floor with everyone. He was on a mission. And that's how you almost need to poke Max a bit to get the best out of him, to get that fire in his belly. And that's what seems to get the best out of Max Verstappen. And it would have been, you look at all the greats of the sport, right? Whether it was Lewis, whether it was, Seb when he was dominating, whether it was Schumacher when he was dominating, or Senna, or Prost, or Lauda, or Clark, or whatever, right? You go throughout. And, having that elite mentality and approach and dedication, and it can come in different forms. Sebastian Vettel was a real stickler for the details and the information. Kimi Räikkönen, he won a world title, and his talent, I think, deserved more. He was like he didn't want to look at, he didn't want to be counselled. He didn't want to be handheld. He was just just give me the car and I'll drive it. And he wasn't one for mind games, and he was a very simple, natural, I think many a driver of that era said, Kimi's the greatest natural talent to ever do it. And, there's not one way of going about it. And I think Lando, I think that there is room for a different approach But I feel like, because Lando gives so much of himself to, like the quadrant stuff he does, for example, which I've been a part of many a time over the years, right? And I understand like that's something he's working on and trying to build it. And Lando's got his LN4 stuff, and he's really like engaged with the fan base. And I feel like more than most drivers, Lando sees a lot and engages a lot. And I think that's all well and good, but you can see why drivers, Checo doesn't have social media. I think, hear me out, Laurie. I'm not making excuses. I'm just explaining the full context. So it's nuanced, right? And I think that I think that he should. Honestly, I think if Lando wants to win a world championship, he needs to consider how much he's engaging with these things and like what he needs to do to, like, Nico Rosberg, right? Nico Rosberg put his whole life on hold and got the championship. And even then, he needed to rely on a bit of luck, let's be honest, get it done. But he got it done. If Lando wants to win a world championship against a prime Max, a prime Charles, potentially a prime Lewis in a Ferrari, we'll see. Like a top tier George Russell who's doing bits at the minute. Like, if he wants to win a title against these guys, I don't know if I don't know what the answer is, but I think something needs to change, because I don't think the way it's going right now, I don't think he'll be able to do it. I'm just being honest. And like, I think he, for himself, for his own, like, does he just kind of sack off any distractions and go full Nico Rosberg? Is that what it takes to get it done? Because you've got to remember as well, if Oscar Piastri does make that step up, if Oscar makes that step up, it's going to be even harder for Lando next year. So, yeah, look, I don't know what the answer is, but I just don't think Lando is equipped right now to do it. That's my opinion. And we'll see. But I hope for him, because Lando's a good guy. He's a really good guy. And I think that a lot of the scrutiny is, I can't even begin to imagine how, like, difficult it is to handle. Whether it's Lando, whether it's Checo, whether it's, Max, like, to deal with this scrutiny that they get is like, wow. Yeah, look, Avkid, that's what I mean. Good people whinge all the time. Like, think, who's the nicest person that you know? Your favourite person in the world? Do they sometimes get on your nerves? Of course they do. Everyone does, right? The difference is that a Formula 1 driver is being broadcast to the world, and so I think we've always got to give concessions to these drivers. I think we're all very hard on these individuals. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see next year. But I feel like there's things he might need to look at to change in order to really, give him the equipment to really go fighting next year. I think a good chat with Nico could be good. Williams, yeah, such a shame really for Alex, because like he was cooking really well in qualifying. He was P2 at the time. Obviously moved down to P7 because he couldn't set another lap because he absolutely destroyed his car. I know Alex said post-race, I wanted to actually have a look. Was there an issue with the car, or was it just purely a skill issue on Alex's front? Because it appeared like a skill issue to me anyway, watching. But I know Alex said something after where he was like, I'm not sure if it was maybe an issue with the car. I know that Alex was straight away, he was like, was there something wrong with the brakes? And they said there wasn't anything seemingly wrong with the brakes. I don't think, I think it was just he locked the rears, to be honest. and just got a little bit wide, in my opinion. Which is a shame because he'd done a really good job to get to where he was. I mean, he went quickest at one point, didn't he? In Q2, I want to say, maybe Q1. I can't remember. But either way, he was going really well. And again, when you look at where Alpine were, Alex making that mistake, which I think was a driver error, I could be wrong, really did hurt the team. So, yeah, not good. And then, of course, Franco having 2 crashes. You know, Franco Colopin 2. He obviously had this kind of great initial drop into the sport. This kind of weekend was always going to come where it was kind of really up against him, and he's had a bit of a stinker. And learning experience for him. So there you go. And incredible vibes this weekend. Obviously for him, it's been really hard personally as well because he lost his granddad, wasn't it? I think the weekend, like the day before qualifying or something. So yeah, I think a lot going on in Franco's mind at the moment with that. And of course, because this is as close to a home Grand Prix as we have for the Argentinians. So there was a lot of support for Franco. He's a young kid. It must have been a lot for him. And, you know, it's not been a great weekend. Are those things related? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. On to next. You know, he's young. He's a rookie. It's sometimes things are going to go like this. So, yeah, not good for Williams overall either because, of course, they're down on parts, down on spares. And you get into the end of the year. Obviously, you account for... My light's gone off. I'm going to change the light. You account for when things break and you add a bit of concession into your kind of budget cap. Like, I don't know, 5, 10 million for like crash damage. Maybe 10 million is a bit much, but oh God. And yeah, they're getting to the end of the season. So any money that's spent on or allocated for crash damage can't be spent on car development. So... the nearer you get to the end of the season is my pink lightsaber. Yeah. Nearer you get to the end of the year, the harder it is to keep on top of these crashes. So, yes. Not much more to say other than that. Sauber, felt like this was the chance for them to get a point, and nil point. Joe was, what was I saying? He was like 10 seconds behind Bottas, and then Alonso was like 20 seconds behind Joe, caught Joe, passed Joe. Yeah, Joe was nowhere. Joe where? Is that a thing? I'm not sure what his explanation for being so far behind Valtteri was. Yeah, this was their chance and they couldn't take it. Even though they got both cars to finish the race, they were still absolutely nowhere. Bottas, yeah, and you know what? Bottas was decent in quali. I'll give you that, Laurie. No, Bottas was decent in quali, actually. He started P11 in the end, which was, wow, well out of place for a Sauber. But yeah, the race wasn't to be. They obviously just did not have the... they didn't have the pace, you know. Yes, of course, rain is the great equaliser, but that doesn't mean you can drive around Interlagos in, you know, a bus and expect to be as quick as Max in his Red Bull. So even if you put Max in the bus and me in the Red Bull, I reckon I'd be quicker. Probably. Maybe. Red Bull, look, I've already said my piece about Max. Incredible drive. Checo, spin, lap 1, couldn't get past Lawson. Obviously, that gave us a good little scrap, wasn't it? Lawson, Hamilton, Perez was fun. I enjoyed that. Is this time up for Checo? Obviously, there's always rumours about Checo, and I'm going to be like, because he won't be in that car next year. It would just be nice to not have to talk about Checo in a Red Bull because it's just really boring. Like, it's all been said. There's nothing more to say. He doesn't suit that car. He knows it. We all know it. Will they replace... Look, the pragmatic thing to do is to try one of the other options in the Red Bull between now and the end of the season just to see how they do. Thing is, there's obviously commercial tyres and blah, blah, blah. that is the pragmatic thing to do, but I fully get why that wouldn't happen. And it would be a shame because I don't think Checo's going to get a seat elsewhere. I mean, it's a shame for his career to end this way anyway, so whether they long it out to Abu Dhabi or end it now, I don't know. I mean, do I think Lawson would do a better job in that car? Probably. Do I think Yuki would do a better job in that car? Maybe. Or maybe he's spent too long in a V-carb and won't be able to adapt to the Red Bull, whereas Liam's done a lot of simulating mileage in the Red Bull. Daniel Ricciardo, I mean, that would certainly get attention on Red Bull, and surely that's the whole reason Red Bull are here. Imagine if they were just like, Daniel, first flight out from Perth to Vegas. See you there, son. Bosh. Imagine. I don't know what they're going to do, but Checo's not going to... He's been there long enough, nothing's going to change. So, shame for him, because I think Checo's a great guy. He's a really good bloke. You can tell, he does a lot of really good charitable work as well. He uses his platform for good, absolutely. But I think his time is done. I've talked about the fines. Flumler. Racing Bulls, better for them. Obviously, very good qualifying for Yuki and Liam. And again, I think Liam put in a really good shift. Defended well. As much as he finished behind Yuki, I think that Liam gave a really good account of himself. And obviously, Yuki got on those wet tyres and you were like, hang on a second. Pretty quick. Didn't work out in the end for Tsunoda, but Yuki's one-lap pace, his one-lap performance, his one-lap ability is well documented. I just think that there's questions about Yuki's consistency, which I think is fair. And I feel like Liam's come in and done such a consistently really solid job. And, elbows out and driving, I think, kind of in an aggressive manner, but in a controlled aggressive manner that I've really kind of enjoyed watching from Liam, because he's got to come in and make a point, right? And I think he was on the edge. To be fair, in that sprint, his defense against Checo, he did kind of move under braking, which was a bit naughty. But outside of that, I was pretty happy with Liam over the course of this weekend. So I think that, I think Liam's, considering as well, Yuki's so much more experienced than Liam, and Liam's come in and looked at least on par in terms of outright pace. But again, Red Bull need a driver who can drive the Red Bull, the specific characteristics required to drive that Red Bull, not just who deserves it. That's not relevant to Red Bull. That shouldn't be relevant to their decision making. And his overtake on Lewis was really good, actually. Yeah, Lewis didn't even see it coming. He just turned right into him. Didn't even see him, which was, not good from Lewis, that at all. Not good. Talking of Lewis, Mercedes. I mean, I think obviously George was George was not happy when that red flag dropped. He was like, I told you so. But then obviously the red flag dropped because of Colapinto's crash. They were planning on, which I think was a fair choice, right? To just put a safety car, knowing that the rain was going to pass, rather than putting a red flag out and then bringing everything to a halt. All the cars come off the track, so the cars stop clearing off the walk from the track. Better to run a safety car for a few laps until the rain chills out a bit and then get it going. I don't dislike that as a premise. But then, of course, Colapinto crashed and then pulled out the red flag. So, it didn't work out for George. And look, again, considering how much Lewis struggled, and look, I don't know if, because they were both struggling with the bouncing in practice. And we've seen this so many times where, Lewis and George just have really contrasting weekends. And typically it's in George's favour. But I don't know, going into the race, why didn't Lewis just take a pit lane start and just have the exact same setup as George? I know that wouldn't be playing to Lewis's strengths and what he wants from a car. But George obviously had a good base car here. Now, I'm not sure exactly what Mercedes did in terms of setup, but I'm assuming they didn't do that. Team didn't let him, he was asking for it. Lewis was asking for the same setup as George and they didn't give it to him. Is that what you're telling me? mop top. Is that is that literally what Lewis asked for? Because I don't know. Maybe he did. But like, surely Lewis, if he's asking for the same setup as George, I don't understand why they wouldn't give it to him. He was asking for a pit lane start in an interview. But like, I don't know. I'm surprised that Lewis isn't or can't for whatever reason get, if that's what he really wants, then I'm surprised. Like maybe the team are just not listening to him, but I don't know why they wouldn't. Like there's if that's what Lewis wants and it's the same setup as George as well, right? I mean, team likely overrode him, but I mean, I find that hard to understand. I'm not saying I don't believe it, right? If that's what you're saying has happened, but I don't know. I struggle to understand why they wouldn't. Like, if Lewis was like, no, this is what I want. This is what I want. I don't know why the team wouldn't give that to him. I don't understand the logic. Old parts v new parts. Yeah, but isn't George had new spec, right? Because I'm sure I remember Rachel Brooks talking to George before the race and him being like, yeah, I've got the new spec car. I don't know. I think that Lewis has obviously he's never found his feet in this ground effect car, and he's only ever driven this Mercedes in this ground effect era. I hope things go better for him at Ferrari. I'm concerned for him that it won't, to be honest. I think Leclerc will definitely have an edge over him. In a Ferrari that Leclerc knows like the back of his hand, George is beating Lewis in a Mercedes, and Mercedes is meant to be Lewis's team. I know it's changed, but like, I'm worried for Lewis over a lap against Charles. I am. I think Lewis's quality shines through mostly in the races, but Lewis has said it himself. He's not been happy with his qualifying performances, and it's a big change going to Maranello. So, Lewis has got a big step up, I think, to make next year, because his performances, and blame it on the team all you like, but you can. The thing is, you can make that claim about any driver, right? That the team hasn't done enough to support the driver. You can make that claim against Zhou Guanyu, right? Who's been getting a Frankenstein car every weekend. And as fans, we've just got to try and understand and look at everything. And it's a combination, right? I think Lewis is, he's getting on. And as a man who's getting on myself, right? It happens to all of us. He's getting older, right? And maintaining those top tier prime levels, because Lewis Hamilton's prime is one of the greatest primes of all time. There's no doubt in my mind about that. To maintain those levels into your 40s is a tough ask. And he takes great care of himself, but it's a tough ask. Then you've got, a car that isn't working for him. He's not happy with it. He's never really happy with this car. Even though, won in Silverstone, that feels like an age ago. But he's never really been like super adept with these cars. And also, he knows his moving team. So psychologically, whether that's consciously or not, it's going to have an effect. It's the same with science, right? And science has... I think where obviously Lewis is moving to Ferrari, who are... We know they're sick, and we know they're great. We know they're going to be able to give him a car to fight for a world title next year. There's no real doubt about that. Whereas science is going to a Williams, so he knows he's going to be taking a step back, and this is his in his prime years right now, and he wants to prove that he's that guy. But yeah, so I think the context of their moves are different, but I can certainly understand why I think Lewis, he probably has taken a bit of a like, let's just get this year done. Like that's how I'd feel if I was in his situation. I think I would. But yeah, hopefully it works for him in Ferrari, because for a career as great as Lewis's, I really hope it doesn't peter out. I really hope he can do something in a Ferrari, because it would be such a shame. Like almost like how Seb's career petered out. It was a shame, given what Seb had achieved at his top. It kind of felt that it almost makes you think back to Rosberg, and he kind of did it right, just jump in. He's won it all. Right, bugger off and go make ice cream in a beef with my missus. But yeah, well done, George. I think George definitely deserves credit for this weekend. And I think that, I remember in my mid-season video, I got a lot of, the big pushback in my mid-season rating was about George, and people were like, you're not rating George highly enough. And maybe I wasn't. I feel like George, he's got a mistake in him, but I feel like he's got the pace. He's convincingly out-qualified Lewis. It's about a tenth and a half, the average gap between the two of them. And, he's got a big head-to-head victory in George's favour. I think, he's almost there. And I think, Toto's pursuit of Max, George is really good. And, I think that it's easy to look past that. But, because he's not the most popular driver, but he's very good. He's very, very good. So yeah, I think George deserves big credit for what he almost got the podium today, almost, but not quite. Haas, not a good weekend. Again, it was a difficult one for Ollie. Definitely Ollie's worst weekend, I think, in F1 to date. Obviously, he's not had very many. Big learning experience for him. It was tough conditions. Again, Alonso, Hamilton, a lot of the old timers were struggling out there. So, yeah, big learning experience for Ollie. But, he got into SQ3, didn't he? And then obviously he should have aborted his lap and didn't. So, his ultimate pace is there. I think we've already seen Ollie's ultimate pace is already there, which is pretty scary. And yeah, he's obviously, he made mistakes in the race, had a bunch of offs. But, the fact that the pace is there already is impressive. So, yes, it's a learning experience, but ultimately, I think I come away from this weekend even more impressed with Ollie Behrman. Because these weekends happen. I said about Franco, I said about Ollie. And then Nico, yeah, obviously that was a slam dunk disqualification because you can't get any support to get your car going again, which obviously the marshals pushed him out. So that's just the way it is. You just kind of got to accept it. And Nico's weekend was going okay up until that point. It was pretty middle of the road. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't terrible. Not much to be said for that, really. Yeah, it was disappointing somewhat, but it was okay. Yeah, it's a shame. Yeah, the marshals did look chuffed with themselves, didn't they, Stella? They looked very happy. Oh, fair enough, but you got me disqualified. But then look, he wouldn't have moved anyway, so he was fully beached, wasn't he? Ferrari, wow, disappointing. Got to say, was expecting more from Ferrari going into the weekend. I think most people were, and they just never really seemed to have the ultimate pace. But Vegas should be better for them. And look, again, we're in a position now where you've got, each track you go to, of these top three teams, you're going to have a different one. Zandvoort, McLaren, Austin, Ferrari, maybe Interlagos, Red Bull. I think also Max made it look even more impressive. But I feel like if Checo hadn't kept tripping up over people, would have made more progress through. You go to each weekend with one of those three being the quickest, and therefore one of those three being the third quickest, which then is fifth and sixth, which doesn't look so good, right? So yeah, I think that it's not panic stations for Ferrari, but they should be good next week. Qatar's going to be difficult for them. That should be a McLaren track, but Abu Dhabi, I think they'll be alright as well. So. But yeah, Carlos just not on his job at all, really, this weekend. Really struggled, didn't he? Not so smooth. Got all his... put too many vibes into Mexico. And then what? He crashes in quali. He crashes in the race. He was off the pace in the sprint race. He just wasn't able to keep up. Yeah, it's just... unfortunately, Carlos does have one of them in his pocket, He will be have a bit of a howler every now and then. But maybe Charles was just doing an incredible job and their car was just the third quickest, and that's just the way it is, Exactly. Back to with some time in Mexico. Exactly that. And then finally, Aston Martin. Oh no. Poor Fernando. I mean, look, again... well done for Fernando for saving some grace at the end and not finishing last. But obviously he crashed in quali as well, so he didn't have a great time. But they fixed the car. And then obviously Lance. Yeah, I mean, look, Lance has been an F1 driver since 2017. So there was obviously some thought going through his head as to why did you drive into the gravel? Just... because he was already going... I don't know if he was... I think he'd engaged reverse, but he was already rolling backwards. And he could have just kept rolling backwards, but then was like, nope, I'm going to brake, and then I'm going to drive into the gravel and try and drive through the gravel. And, like, when you've been in F1 for this long, that is a real... I mean, even if you've just... No, that's not even... an excuse, is it? Because even if this is your first race in F1, like, that is given... There's nothing more to say. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know what he said after the race. I know Lance loves to give a very blunt and very minimal response, but I reckon after this race, it was extra blunt and extra minimal. What can I say? There was tarmac around the gravel as well. Exactly, DH. Exactly. Right. Okay. Wow, this has been a long one, hasn't it? This has been a long one. But thank you all for watching. I'm now going to continue to be live over on Patreon. So if you do want to support me on Patreon and get access to the exclusive post-Chinwag live streams, you can. Description down below, patreon.com/TommoF1 if you want to support me over there. Thank you all for watching. The numbers have been really good for this stream, actually, which I don't know if that's... I don't know why. Sometimes they are, and it's been really good. And I've been going for 1 hour 52 minutes, which is pretty crazy. So thank you, PP, Laurie, Halita, Priest, Sign, Mark, Avkid, Martin, Beekeeper, Decarin, DH, Dawood, Defon, Daniel, Charmander, Hot Dog, Freya, Rainer, Sam, Gladiator, Thomas, AV, Jack, Sense, Camping Dutchman, Shlom, Stella, Michael, Sophia, Doa, Lolly, Bennett, Avkid, Freestylers, Kyan, Greg, Sheldon, Malted, Patrick, Gigacubitsa, Martin, Decarin, JIMM, Rob, Smoke Dat Quack. Great name. Cheers, everyone. Appreciate you all taking the time. Really do, honestly. Thank you for making this my job. It's honestly the greatest pleasure of my life. Cheers, everyone. I'll see you for the next stream, whenever that is. Patreon now, in like 5 minutes. Bye.